Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the Bitcoin market cycles and my belief on if we are going to have yet another market cycle. So if you guys enjoy the content, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. Also make sure to check out the sponsors for this channel, ftx.us. I'll leave a link to them in the description below. You can sign up with my referral code SNOWYCrypto and get a 5% discount on your exchange fees. So I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin market cycles throughout this video, but first let's just cover what historically we've seen throughout Bitcoin's history. And we've gone through these 4-year intervals of ebb and flow patterns where we've seen a peak towards the 3-year mark of a market cycle, followed by a 1-year decline in that bear market low. So just as an illustration, we can see, this extension was 35 months out from the cycle low, which was followed by yet another bear market decline, taking us down around 85% in just the following 14 months. And then we had the next cycle taking us up to a 35-month peak, followed by another bear market taking us down around 85% over just the following 12 months. And you can see that we had our market cycle peak towards month 35 here back in November at the $69,000 level. And since then, we've been declining for the past 9 months with a current low down around 73%. Now, if we were to speculate out a 12-month bear market and say it's going to continue this trend towards that 4-year cycle low, that would bring us into November of this year. And I think this is the most likely scenario, and this is where the market cycle would start to transition into yet another bull market, and we would see a continuation of this longer term uptrend. But as of late, I'm starting to see a lot of people speculate that this trend is no longer going to continue. We're going to have something completely different play out just because of a variety of reasons, some of them being the macroeconomic uncertainty, some claiming that inflation is way too high for Bitcoin to advance, or in general, a lot of these other reasons where I think some people are starting to say that maybe we just have a slow grind down to some of those lower targets towards the 12 or even $10,000 region over the next few years. So this is, I guess, some sort of general idea where they do think that it is going to experience a decline. We're not going to reverse and the bottom is not anywhere close. Now, in general, I think this is not going to happen. I don't think anything like this will happen with Bitcoin throughout the rest of this market cycle. I think we're going to be seeing that market cycle bottom towards the end of this year, a reversal, and then potentially a move back up to all-time highs. And this is because I don't think that human psychology is ever going to change. Historically, we've always seen during the extremes of price action, we have extremes in sentiment, where historically in bear market bottoms, we've seen people call Bitcoin and crypto a Ponzi, a scam. We've seen all the names, all the claims every single time, and then it always reverses, and during these peaks we have all that euphoria return. So I personally remember back in April 2021, so many people were calling for upward targets that were frankly unrealistic, and they were calling for $200, $300, or even $400,000 per Bitcoin. We had altcoins like Dogecoin and Shiba do insane multiples and reach unjustified valuations, and overall the euphoria was there, the peak was there. And then ever since, we've just had this double top and we've started to decline and filter out a lot of those euphoric emotions. And now we're once again at the extremes where people are calling for Bitcoin and crypto as some sort of Ponzi, a scam, never going back up to new all-time highs. And we're seeing the extreme sentiment start to take over. Now, this is a good sign for Bitcoin. We do like to see eventually that flush out of the sentiment because we don't want everyone talking about Dogecoin and Shiba and all those other altcoins that we're just pumping every 100% every few days, right? So now we're back at these extremes. Now we're seeing those calls for Bitcoin to be dead, and we're starting to see more and more people speculate that, it's just going to have a slow grind down lower to $10,000 for the next few years. And one of the main narratives right now is that the world economy and the macroeconomic conditions are not great, and Bitcoin is not going to advance because inflation is so high and the Fed is hawkish. Now, while I do accept those are valid cases, I just don't think that any of those are the most rational or reasonable, considering how we've already seen that we've had this 72% decline. We're down into these extremes. The sentiment is getting bad once again, and the ebb and flow is starting to turn its tides. Everyone is calling for bearish and lower price targets just because of the current narrative, which again is the Fed having being very hawkish and having to target high inflation numbers with the most recent CPI print at around 9%. So again, I think the tides are going to shift once again. We're going to start to transition into another cycle where we do have a bear market low towards the end of this year, and then we're going to start continuing back up to new all-time highs. And I think this because human psychology just does not change. We're always going to be seeing these periods where historically we go through the ebb and flow with bear market sentiment really taking over, people calling for lower prices after having experienced their 70% portfolio declines. So what happens here is, everyone's euphoric at the peak. All the whales who got in early, all the smart money that invested earlier on has distributed into those weak hands that are starting to get very euphoric on the 200, 300K price targets. That becomes unsustainable. There is not enough buyers to support this. And eventually they start to slowly bleed out. They capitulate. And then instead of understanding their own issues with buying at the tops, they begin to start to say, well, it's a scam because I lost 90%, 99% of my investment on X altcoin. And that sentiment really does a number of filtering out the euphoric emotions, filtering out all that noise. And then from there, the smart money comes back, it starts to accumulate, and then the process repeats. And I think this is always going to happen. It's just human psychology at this point. It's just people always wanting to be greedy at these tops, and people are always wanting to be fearful towards these bottoms. Now, again, I do understand that obviously Bitcoin cannot just continue this pattern forever, where every 4 years it has a bottom, we do it again, and we go back up to new all-time highs. I think that is a very valid understanding of markets, and we can't just keep continuing that pattern because eventually we'll just reach a market cap that is unsustainable to see increasing returns. Now, I don't think we've reached that point yet, and I think that in general we could experience another market cycle, but with just different iterations. And that's what we've already been seeing with Bitcoin. First, if we go back to 2013, we had essentially a double peak cycle, with the first peak at around $280, the next peak around $1,200. So this first cycle was around a double peak. The next cycle was more or less a slow parabolic trend where, we just eventually just kept going up and up and up at a faster and faster pace towards this euphoric blow off phase, and then we capitulated back down. And then this cycle was more or less a double top where we reached the same price point and had two peaks. So we've already seen different iterations of market cycles, but again, it's following the same structure where every 4 years we form that sentiment and price cycle low, and then we return to those new all-time highs. And I do think that we could see a different variation this time. We could potentially have a peak earlier on and then a longer duration of bear market decline. We could have a peak that does not necessarily exceed the prior all-time highs by a significant multiple. You can see this peak at around $1,200 was multiplied by 16x more or less to this 20K peak, and then the 20K peak to the $70,000 level was about a 3.5x. So we could have, say, a 1.5x going up to a peak around $100,000, or any number of possibilities, but I just don't expect a scenario in which none of that is actually happening again. We're never seeing that euphoria come back. So overall, I do see another market cycle being the most likely and most probable outcome for Bitcoin. I don't think any of these bear market theses are going to take place. I don't think we're going to see a $10,000 retest in a few years. That just does seem a little bit unrealistic to me, even though they have quite a valid justification behind the macroeconomic conditions. I think there's always going to be some sort of narrative towards these bear market bottoms. Whether they are valid or not, I think that there is eventually going to be a change in the tide where Bitcoin again changes that bear market structure back into the cycle low and then transitions into a new market cycle. So I hope you guys did enjoy the content and the analysis. Once again, you can check out our sponsors with the link in the description below over at ftx.us. Great exchange, highly recommend. And as always, I hope you guys did enjoy, and I will see you in the next one.